Hey there, dissectors. Today we're going to delve into a place so sinister that you may want to find yourself a pillow to hide behind. If you're new to my channel, I'm glad you're joining us as we're going to discuss one of the most haunted castles in England called Chillingham Castle. It is said to have more than 100 ghosts residing here. So let's briefly look at the history of Chillingham Castle before we dive into the many stories of the ghosts who were often tortured and murdered here. You will find the castle near Northumberland, close to the Scottish border. It was built before 1246 and was originally a monastery. Now, way back in 1298, King Edward stayed here before his fight with William Braveheart Wallace, where Wallace was defeated. Now, he managed to escape with his life, but for many Scottish people, this was just the beginning of a time filled with torture and death. The Grey family were the first to own the castle, but after their time came the Bennet family. This was a powerful family with no less than 18 becoming members of the most noble order of the Garter. The purpose of this order was to connect the most powerful nobles to the king. But the Bennet family were quite prone for being outspoken in their approach to things, causing many to become pissed off with them. 8 family members were executed in the most horrific way. They were hung, drawn and quartered, and then their heads impaled on the city gate as a warning to others. It seems you were classed as lucky if you only lost your head. Can you imagine that? So let's look at the tales of the many ghosts that haunt this castle and the horrific way that prisoners were sadly treated back then by people with way too much power. Our first ghost was the executioner, who tortured and murdered many Scottish people over a 3-year period. His name was John Sage and had the nicknames John Dragfoot due to a war injury, and more alarmingly, the Butcher of the Scots. It is said that he tortured more than 50 people per week, and in his time, over 1,000. In the torture chamber, you will find his devices like the wheel, the Iron Maiden, the iron chair, as well as the rack. Now, the rack was used to stretch people until their joints popped out of place. Visitors who have stood near the rack have claimed to hear the ghostly popping of limbs still happening. Sage was a sick individual who would also impale, boil and starve his victims to death. Wanting to find new and creative ways to hurt the Scots, he also created his own device, which was a barrel filled with iron nails. After the poor person was positioned inside the barrel, they would be rolled all the way down to the opposite side of the torture chambers, skinning the victims alive. Worth noting here too is that the chamber had a sloping floor to make it easier for the blood to drain away. How thoughtful of them. The original torture chamber is located underneath the castle's tea room, but was relocated for visitors after a séance went terribly wrong, and whatever was conjured needed to be kept away from people. Human remains are still down there too. You may be pleased to know that Sage finally got what he deserved and was publicly executed in the courtyard. He was hated by everyone, so much so that while he was being hung and fighting to breathe, the public started to cut off his fingers, toes, lips, nose and genitals. His ghost has been seen wandering around this area, but you may want to stay clear of him as he seems just as nasty in death. Sage was not the only one to meet a grisly end in Chillingham Castle's courtyard though. You see, at the end of the English and Scottish War, the English needed to get rid of any remaining prisoners and make a statement while doing it. Witnessed by the youngest children of the Scots, all men, women and older children were burnt alive. Needless to say, visitors have seen full-bodied apparitions and disembodied voices here. Now, you might think that the younger children were released, but sadly this is not the case. Their fate was just as brutal, as the English were concerned that in later years, these children would seek out revenge. Instead, after witnessing their families getting murdered, they were taken to King Edward's room and hacked to death. In King Edward's room, guests have described sensing an evil spirit lurking in the shadows that can become violent and attack people. This has happened on numerous occasions. But are all the ghosts angry? Well, it would appear not. In the Pink Room, which today is the private residence of the current owners of the castle, skeletal remains of a young boy were found buried in one of the walls. Workers described broken fingernails and fingers on his remains, which leads many to believe he was bricked in the wall alive. Today, though, His spirit is friendly and much loved. People have said that before he shows himself, a blue halo of light appears, and then he walks from within the wall into the room. This action has given him the name the Blue Boy. Now, skeletal remains are being found throughout the castle even to this day, especially in cold weather, as it seems to push remains up to the surface of the ground. One such place that 3 human skeletons were found is the chapel. 2 of the bodies were found under the glass stained window, while the third was discovered tucked away in a back corner underneath floorboards. These last remains are believed to have been of a little girl, but no one is sure how she died. If you're wanting to communicate with her, she seems very happy to do so, but only if you are a female. Is this because a man killed her and so she fears them? Or maybe she misses her mother and wants to be close to a woman for this reason? Whatever the case, if you sit by the place that she was discovered, many visitors have described an overwhelming feeling of sadness coming over them. Now, as you can imagine, old castles used to have plenty of treasures that they needed to keep safe. One such room, which you can stay in today if you're feeling brave enough, is the still room, which is connected to the dungeon. Each night, a guard would be locked inside the room to protect its contents. On one such night, a guard witnessed an old woman in the room with him, asking for a glass of water. Confused but also trying to be polite, the guard went to get her the drink, but when he returned, she'd gone. In life, it is thought that she was probably poisoned inside the still room and has been given the nickname the Pantry Ghost. In this same room, though, a Spanish witch is said to have met her end also. Before she died, she cursed the castle, stating that anyone who took something from the place would experience terrible luck. The room now contains plenty of items that have been returned by visitors. As I said earlier, this room is connected to the dungeon, which is a very tight space indeed with only 2 cells in it. To add to the chilling atmosphere, it is also pitch black and freezing cold. Inside one of the cells is a murder pit. Here, any injured prisoners would be thrown to die a slow death. Even more yucky is the fact that a door opens up from the gardens to the pit, giving access to the bodies. It's believed that the castle's dogs would eat the dead prisoners. If you decide to visit Chillingham Castle, there are still human remains left in the pit. Now, the garden and lake area of the property are truly beautiful and peaceful. Sadly though, the history of the place is far from anything so pleasant. There used to be 3 hanging trees in this area, and when someone was hung there, they wouldn't take down their bodies. Instead, they let them rot until they fell to the ground. Bones are still found here to this day. The lake is just as creepy, with hundreds of murdered Scotsmen dumped in the icy water. It is said if you put your hand in the lake, a spirit will pull you under the water and drown you. Another place that still holds human remains is the main entry driveway, where hangings would be held too. This has been given the name the Devil's Walk. If you walk along this area at night, it's quite possible you might hear ghostly footsteps creeping behind you. Now, these are possibly the spirits of dead monks who used to take pity on the hung people and would try to cut them down. If they were found doing this, though, they too would find themselves at the end of a noose. Chillingham Castle is a place filled with history that sets the nerves on edge. You will find your batteries will drain away to nothing quickly, even after being fully charged. There are many cold spots too, with ghostly apparitions witnessed, disembodied creepy footsteps and voices, as well as guests being touched or punched. Today though, Chillingham Castle is owned by Sir Humphrey Wakefield, who bought the place for his wife after discovering she is a descendant of the original Grey family. They completely renovated the place and created holiday apartments for people to enjoy. Not only does it attract plenty of ghosts, the wildlife enjoy the grounds too, with foxes, deer and badgers to name just a few. You can also enjoy the Chillingham wild cattle that are kept there as well. It truly does sound like a place to bring your camera and hopefully catch an image to enjoy, or maybe a sinister shadow lurking around a corner. If you've been to this castle, please let me know in the comments below what your experiences were. Until next time, stay safe out there.